done over a week or a weekend, where you put them up online and they're playable, they're finished, they're polished, and people can get in there and try it out. And it doesn't have to be huge. In fact, it shouldn't be. Or it could be like just your side project that you've been working on for a month or two, putting together and polishing to be your portfolio piece that you're going to show off to prospective employers. Because the alternative is like a lot of people think that they can just give people their source code to stuff or like send them their Git repo or whatever, which like it's nice to know that people know how to use source control and all that, but nobody really wants to just go through and read 20 or 30 applicants' source code and see what that does, try to figure out.
Is this fun?
Yeah. Is this a game? Does it work? Does it compile? Is it going to actually does this code make sense? Because you got to go through and like try to absorb people's projects that you don't know anything about, and you're just not likely to do it. But if you have this little playable slice, something that they can just jump in and play for a minute, maybe 2 minutes at most, and then have fun with, and it looks polished, it works right, it runs well, that'll get you a lot further than almost anything else. Just because people will see that, hey, you're actually able to build a game, you're able to finish it, it runs, it looks okay, and it works. It's not buggy. Like that's beyond. Right. Like that's already a big step above most other applicants, right? And those are the ones that, at least in my experience and the people that I know and talk to, those are the ones that we always look at first. Just go through like, hey, look, portfolio. We can look through the stuff that they've done, and it doesn't have to be a lot of stuff. Like I said, maybe one playable thing, a couple screenshots of stuff, and it's so much easier to absorb and know that person actually can finish things and do things, versus a list of projects that they started in school and worked on that you can't see anything about, can't see what they did on it, how much of the project was them, or if it's a team project, or if the thing even got finished and completed, right? Like a lot of time you just get this list of like, oh, I did all these projects. Like, right. Not anywhere near as valuable as show me like a little thing that I can pop in a web browser and play for 20 seconds and go blow up some aliens or whatever the simple thing is. Yeah.
Right. And so I guess what I would also, add to that is you don't want, maybe you could have a tutorial project in there, right? Like how many people go in there and like make it follow some like 3 or 4 YouTube tutorials on making a game, you know what I'm saying? And then try to submit that as their work. What would you say to someone who does that,
It's better than the alternative of not doing that and not doing anything, but it's still not what I would recommend. Maybe taking one of those though and adjusting it, tuning it, and making it your own so that it has just a little bit of a different weird feel, where it's not just going through a tutorial where you've built something a little bit different. That would help a lot more than just a really simple tutorial. But to be honest though, a lot of the time, if you did go through a tutorial and you did it really well and you polished it up, I don't know that the developers are going to know the difference, right? Unless you went through like the rollerball tutorial and you just like submitted rollerball from Unity, right? But like if you went through something a little bit bigger and had done some things, made a little changes, people probably aren't even going to notice. They'll know, hey, you made a Subway Surfer game, or she made Flappy Bird or whatever the thing is, right? Like in some other context.
I think it's really hard at this point to see like what if you follow some obscure tutorial like a fighting game. I saw one Awesome Tuts fighting game tutorials, and it's probably like 50 parts. No one's gonna know, especially if you change the models. You already have yourself like a project there at that point, right? I'm not a fan of like stealing. It's not necessarily stealing, I guess, but to use it to show that you can at least follow instructions and figure out what the code does. I think that's the biggest thing, is to know what code is actually doing. I think that's important.
Yeah, and to be able to put the code together and just make it work. The biggest thing that when you're hiring a new game developer, like the number one thing that you want to be able to do is say, hey, we need this bit of functionality, make that happen, right? Without breaking and destroying everything else, and without me telling you exactly what all of the steps are. If I have to tell all the steps, then it's not much harder to just type them out. So it's like, ideally, you want to get people who are able to go in there and then with a little bit of direction put together the systems and changes, and then take some adjustments or make the adjustments when they're needed after they submit it. So they'll submit it and then probably won't be perfect, talk a little bit about it, and then improve on it and make the changes. But really, like, yeah, that's the goal of hiring anybody, right? Is to get them to be able to do the job, where you just kind of say the thing and then the thing happens.
Right, exactly. How hard is it to work with a team, right? When you're coding, because everyone has like there's always one output, but how many inputs can there be to get to the same result in coding, right? So like, how hard is it to work with like a real team, like a programming team?
I to be honest, I don't think it's too difficult at all when it comes to game stuff. And they obviously it's going to vary from team to team, but in my experience, working on a team is really a pretty positive thing because you get to talk to a bunch of other developers who are all into the same exact thing and kind of pushing for that same goal. And as long as the team isn't terrible, which in my experience really hasn't ever been, the developers just tend to help each other and you get a lot better a lot faster. I think if you work solo by yourself just for a long time, you can definitely grow and get better as a developer, but you have to force yourself to do it. You have to be constantly going out there looking for things to learn and ways to learn different opportunities and stuff. But when you're on a team with more experienced developers, senior developers that have been there longer than you, which was kind of my experience going in, you learn a lot from them too. So like, you'll run into problems, and as soon as you run into a problem, you just grab one of them, and well, at least when you're not working from home, at least you could grab one of them to come over and just run you through, and you may end up having like a 2 or 3 hour conversation of exactly how to architect out some big system and why it works that way and how it worked in other games and what pitfalls they ran into when they tried to do it different ways in other games. I mean, I had those conversations all the time when I was, especially at Sony. It was just like a very common thing. Lots of senior developers there to just learn from and just gain knowledge from. And if you got stuck, there's always somebody there that can just kind of help you along the way. When it comes to like merge conflicts, though, because those are kind of the thing that a lot of people worry about is like stepping on other people's toes or like merging and breaking stuff. Most of the time on those bigger teams, they're managed out enough where the code is separated out so that you're working on one section of stuff and another developer or another set of developers are working on another section of stuff, and there's not too much interlap or overlap, I guess. But obviously there are definitely cases where like the worst case experience I had was with one of my buddies who was fixing he fixed a feign death bug for our MMO so the monks could lay down, pretend they were dead, and everything would ignore them. He fixed a bug with that, and it broke the entire crafting system, right?
Yeah, it's like no real relation, right? And then all of a sudden,
none at all. Yeah, just some check in there that was invalid. I forget which one it was, but there was a check that it was doing that was invalid on the feign death thing. He fixed that, and then it broke a check that is the crafting check was reusing that same state check basically, and so just obscure. Failing out.
Yeah, with game dev,
yeah,
so crazy.
It broke it. Didn't notice until it got to like the test server that the QA people are on there testing it, like, oh yeah, no, the crafting doesn't work.
And so like, how do you?
That was rare.
How do you find like? Do you keep debugs in like kind of like up till beta, or do you keep like debug code in there so like, all right, this is where it's failing, this is where it's failing, or do you have to go in there and kind of go back and go through all the motions again after you've gotten to that point?
Right. Well, if so, in that case, with those big teams, what we would do is just have constant, just continuous integration and delivery. So we would do a commit, a build would fire off, and then it would go off to the QA team. And there would probably be like 100 commits in a day. So they would get a couple builds. The build would take like an hour or two. So they would get whatever, a couple builds a day throughout the day. Because they wouldn't get one for every commit. It would just bundle them up the next day. So then the QA team would just do a quick smoke check on it and make sure that everything was good. And then they would do a bigger check as we went out. But that's like with a large live game with, 100,000 people playing actively. So you have a big team of people on there testing constantly and stuff. With smaller stuff, we'll go through a much tighter iteration, but still try to release as often as possible just so that you can see that things are working and stuff. And one of the recommendations that I'd make for especially bigger teams, definitely not for anybody starting out though, but for bigger teams that have longer term projects, is to set up automated testing so that you don't have to worry about it as much, so that you have some stability and comfort knowing that when your build goes out, it actually works, and that there aren't bugs in there that are just completely destroying the thing.
Right. So we were talking about kind of adding games to your resume and stuff. How do you go about coming up with ideas, right, for games to prototype and stuff like that? Like, how do you know something's a game? You know, you can think of like, a game where you drink your coffee cup, but that's not a game. How do you find that idea that's like a game to start the ball rolling?
That's a great question. And I don't know, like for
Right.
actually coming up with like designs or ideas for the game, like that's I'd say the part that I'm terrible at and why I'm not like an indie game dev. I know a lot of people have these great indie game ideas, these things that they want to build. I always just kind of like to work with a game designer who has something already in mind. Because what I find is like a lot of the time I will come up with an idea, but it's really just like a very loose idea. And it's enough that I could describe it in like maybe a paragraph. And I was like, hey, there's this dude, there's this thing going on, and this is the environment. And that's like my game design, right? But then I'll talk to one of my game designer friends, and they're like just mechanic after mechanic, just throwing them out there. It's going to be like this, look like this. These characters, like I want to model this character after this guy. Like they're very into coming up with like a cool design. And I feel like the best is if you can kind of merge the programming skill and the design skill, maybe even grab an artist. Like, I feel like the ideal team is like a programmer, an artist, and a designer just working together, making like a project that they all love. Because then you get kind of that skill from all the sides. Design side, like picking what's going to be fun and what's going to be cool, I'm terrible at it. But making it actually work, that I can do.
Right, exactly. It's hard. It's hard for me too. Like I'm thinking, even not even being unique, looking at games that are like, okay, what can I even copy today? It's like at this point, it's like I don't want to copy it exactly. So even coming up with even a small mechanic change seems to be very difficult for me. So I guess there's just certain kind of brains that can do it.
Well, it's a lot of it's from practice too. Like the game designers, they sit there and like we practice coding and stuff. They practice designing. They'll sit there and practice like with pen and paper, with all kinds of different things. They'll practice on the computer, writing up design docs, writing up ideas, and just it's another one of those skills that you just got to build and hone and work on. And it's just not one that I've ever felt was like my strong suit or the one where I wanted to focus.
No, yeah, I can understand that completely. Do you have any experience like with marketing any games? Like I know you don't really make your, like you're saying you're not you don't consider yourself an indie developer, but do you, on any teams, have you ever marketed any games, like how to get it out there? Oh,
Yeah, so I haven't myself, but I've worked with the marketing teams a bit. And in my experience, they just they spend a ton of money to sell stuff, and then the game still has to be good, right? So you can dump a ton of money marketing a game, and if the game isn't appealing and it isn't going to get people to go in there and play it, it'll get people in there initially, but not at a profitable rate, right? Like I've seen companies blow a lot of marketing money on games that just weren't really appealing to their market or to the audience. Where it was like didn't matter how much money you got, you could get customers, but you weren't going to get long term like customers that were going to stay around. So it's, but I think also if you don't do any marketing, you're going to completely kill your game too, obviously, right?
right. Like
So
you have the best game, and if you don't spend a dime on it, no one's gonna see it except for you and maybe your friends who you show it to at that point too.
right, unless it grows completely crazy viral, it's really hard. What I generally would recommend though is for people to start talking about their game kind of early on, almost right away when you start working on it, right? Once you got an idea that you're actually thinking you might actually build it, and maybe not even completely sure, but you're starting to build it, start talking about it and getting it out there. And don't try to wait and keep it secret and do like some big announcement reveal when the game's all done, because nobody's going to be hyped up for it. Nobody's going to be ready. Nobody's going to care. You're going to have like 3 people that pretend to care if you do it that way. Much better to just start off early, just getting it out there and just share what you're building, how you're building it, what that process is like. And the biggest thing is like, don't worry about people stealing your idea, because they're just not going to do it. Like everybody that I talk to, not every, right, like 9 out of 10 people that I talk to who want to build a game are all terrified that somebody's going to steal their idea. I don't know how many NDAs I've signed for no reason because somebody thought that the whole world was going to steal their idea. Like, there are a million unlimited ideas. There's so many ideas out there. Like, you go to a game studio, every person there has ideas for a game that they want to make. Most of them probably have like 5 or 10 games that they want to make. Like, there's so many ideas out there that I think that they're basically worthless. Like, game ideas are totally useless unless if you're not executing, like it doesn't matter. It's zero value. You may as well put it out there, let somebody else try to do it because but nobody's going to do it because everybody has their own ideas. That's the thing. Like nobody goes out there and goes like, "Hey, this one guy had a great game idea. I'm gonna go make that now."
No, exactly. And I think that really only goes to design elements because like the mechanics are pretty. There's mostly pretty limited within it. Like every person has kind of taken mechanics from other games at that point. So if they're worried about people stealing from them, I mean, they've already in a way borrowed. I mean, I wouldn't say they've stolen, but they've borrowed from other games already. Like there's
and if they haven't, there's definitely that mechanic in other games, and they just don't know about it, right? Like,
exactly.
I mean, people think that they've invented something, and I'm like, oh, you mean like that game, and that game that exists that you weren't interested enough to find out existed already? So maybe it's not the kind of thing you want to build.
Exactly. Well, what's your favorite kind of game to? Do you have a favorite kind of game to make? You know what I'm saying? Like something that you like. That you enjoy making? You know, it's hard. It's an odd question.
Yeah, I really like making MMOs, but I'm a little bit tired of them just because they're so hefty. Like they take so much work to do the tiniest thing. The other stuff that I like, strategy games. So one of the things I'd really like to build, like a long-term one, is a large-scale real-time strategy game. Something where it could have like an RTS with 100+ players in it.
So like an MMO
it's still like that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's got like the weird technical challenges and the game design challenges of like how do you make that fun and balanced with a ton of players, and then how do you make it not fall apart? So not something I've focused on, but I've experimented with it multiple times, just trying to come up with seeing if I could do it and what that would look like. If I ever come up with a cool design for it, though, I think I might do it.
I mean, that sounds really cool. It sounds like it would make me so mad though when people come around and just destroy my whole city that I've been building.
You would think so. I think that with 100 players, like there's got to be a giant power imbalance, and there's no downside to conquering. So
exactly,
I don't know what it would be like. It might be fun. It might be terrible.
It would be hard. I feel like if just on the basic level, the way that I understand it now, it would be impossible to start if someone's already ahead of you. You know what I'm saying? Because unless you befriend them, they're already the Persian Empire versus like I don't know, like a little village in Africa or something. I don't know. It would be
some little town. Yeah, no, I think you'd have to all start at once and just go like for whatever 2-3 hours until the game ends, right? Until everybody's dead. So you have a winner.
Yeah, see that okay. So having like actual game structure would be cool, but it's just hard. I mean, I think it'd be cool to be the griefer or even the griefy and just raging at my computer, honestly. But I'm like
just running around with the one sniper unit left.
Yeah, for real.
My base is gone, but I got my guy left.
Yeah, so you teach one-on-one lessons as well. How like you do like individual lessons or just class lessons? I know you do like Unity3D College as kind of your main. I see that advertised a lot. So
yeah, so I just teach online courses now where we go through and the way that those courses are set up is I just record out the lessons and then release them for a day, and it'll be usually about an hour long of teaching, split into like 5 different sections most of the time, so that it's easy to kind of break through. And then I have a whole interface on the site. It's just on game.courses, and you go through and you can you get each lesson when they come out, go through them, and then go through some quizzes and other things. And then I hop on calls with people as they need help. Most of the time, people just need help through email, so I just reply to them in email. In fact, I have like half a dozen emails I need to reply to after this from students. But I just help them through there and kind of go through the process of learning game development and hopefully getting to the point where they feel that they can build a game on their own. And then even with this beginner, the programmer course, they should be able to get to at the point where they can at least pass like a basic Unity certification, like programmer certification. You should get all of the skills that they need to do that part, at least be able to accomplish a junior developer job. Definitely not to get a junior developer job, because like getting a job is requires more than just knowing how to code it. You have to know how to code the stuff, but you also have to find the jobs and sell yourself. Got to do a little bit of marketing yourself. Again, with that portfolio is the way that I would recommend it. But mostly just work on teaching them how to build games and how to do the code and what the code means, going through a lot of C# fundamentals, and just a lot of Unity fundamentals on just how things tie together, how you would want to do it, and how you'd want to do it in a way that isn't going to ideally fall apart later, right? So that you don't start picking up bad practices right from the beginning. So.
Right. So I actually saw some of your videos have to do with like proper game architecture. Would you recommend people to learn that early on or after they've learned the kind of the basics of programming?
After the basics, for sure. I would say keep it simple at first, get used to doing all of the things that work, and then start worrying about performance and improving things a little bit later on once you feel comfortable with it. Because I feel like if you start off overly concerned about those things, it's easy to just go down a rabbit hole and waste your time and not learn the important things that you need to do and just kind of focus on stuff that's side and totally useless. Like you could go in and just optimize the hell out of your Flappy Bird game, but it's you're never going to see a difference in it, right? You're never going to notice a difference, and you're not going to really learn from it either because you're not going to be seeing why you did that. It's just going to seem like a waste of time. So I feel like it's always good to get people into the position where they're starting to see a problem before you can teach them how to get out of that problem. So kind of get them close to it so they can see it, and then learn the steps out of that problem. But yeah,
right,
that's
exactly. So we were talking a little bit before. You started in C++ like a long time ago. When did you get into Unity?
Oh, okay. It was right when, I don't remember the year. It was right around when the iPhone came out. Was when I did the switch. So it was the iPhone 1 was out, and Unity was the only engine at the time that could deploy to it. It was the first engine that could deploy out to the iPhone. I think it beat everybody else by about a year. So when that happened, a friend of mine called me up and said, hey, we want to start a studio making stuff for these new iPhones. Are you interested? I said, sure. And at the time, I already knew C# well enough because I've been doing C++ on MMOs and then C# for the tools on the MMOs. I had a lot of experience with it. And I was like, okay, we'll try out this Unity thing and see how it is. It was a little bit different and a little bit weak at first, but it didn't take very long to get used to it and kind of start to get into the flow. I'd come from using Unreal before that, so I was used to, I guess, very different stuff. But when I got into Unity, it didn't take too long to get comfortable. I'd say it probably took like a month or so before I was able to put together like a little game that we could maybe somewhat play,
right?
Like something that felt kind of like a game. But it did take quite a while to actually build out our first game. So it's been a while, but it was all around that iPhone and trying to figure out what would be good on an iPhone. When they launched.
Exactly. Okay, that's cool. And so back to now, we're talking about C++. Those AAA game studios, they use, like, the majority of them end up using C++, right?
Yes. So most of them either use Unreal or their own engines. So those are like the two most common ones for big AAA studios. Part of that is just because a lot of them use their own engines because that was really the only option back in the day, right? A lot of the bigger studios that have been around for a while, been around for 20 years or more, they use their own engines. There was nothing else available, and they're still using their own engines now. They've been building on them, and their whole teams and their whole company like works around these custom engines. A lot of them, though, switched over to Unreal as it became more affordable because it was somewhat similar to what they had. All their programmers know C++, and the art pipeline for it is really good too. So yeah, I would say most AAA companies are going to use either Unreal or something that if you know C++, you're going to be a lot more comfortable with. They're not going to be using something like Unity. I don't know the exact numbers, but if I had to guess, I'd say probably like 20-25% might be using something like Unity in there, and maybe even lower for the AAA studios now. I think that's slowly changing and evening out a little bit, but Unreal still has a huge foothold in the AAA market.
Right. It seems like Unity and Unreal are becoming more similar. Not necessarily the same at all, but they're like Unity is kind of upgrading everything to kind of mimic Unreal. But how would you recommend anyone who's learning Unity for that purpose to kind of transition over? Like, I know that maybe they don't want to learn Unreal or maybe they don't want to learn C++, but I mean, at some point, if they want a job there, they're gonna have to try to like
Yeah, I would say learn whatever it is the place that you want to work at is using. So if the place that you really want to work at is using Unreal, you should be learning Unreal. Use Unreal, learn Unreal, and do that solely. If they're using some other engine, try learning that engine instead. Like figure out the thing that they're actually using and learn that thing first. Maybe you end up not wanting to work there and you change that completely, but I would say that learning a different engine than the one that they're using is a bit of a distraction, and you're just kind of wasting time. You could just jump right into learning the thing that they're using and going for that job right away. Don't take the extra step of learning something else. I mean, it's okay to learn something else and get a little bit familiar with it, but if that's not where your goal is, don't focus on it and don't spend months learning Unity to go up, then try to figure out how to use Unreal. It's going to make it. You're going to be like, I don't want to do this now. The Unity part was easy. Now I know how to do that. And you're going to fall into the just never getting it done trap. Like, just jump over to the one they want and start applying.
Right, which is odd coming from the guy who teaches Unity, but I mean, it makes much more sense. You know what I'm saying? Because, like, everyone has that question, should I do Unity or Unreal? And there's not really a good, the best answer, that's actually the best answer I've heard for that. And maybe you should make a video about that, because that's so useful, because all the videos on there are just, like, telling you to use Unity, because I don't even really know. They're like, oh, it's so much easier to do. But if your goal isn't to have an easy time, your goal is to get a job, a lot of people might just get confused, learn Unity for a year, all of a sudden go apply for a job. They'll be like, oh, do you know C++? And your entire year is not wasted, but you've wasted a good portion of it learning C# and the ends of Unity, when you really could have learned game development through Unreal and learned how to make exactly the games they're looking for.
Yeah, you learn the same, because you're going to learn, I mean, essentially like the same skill set. You're just learning different syntaxes, different tool positions, and like slightly different workflow. And you want to know the one that they're using, because that's what they're going to ask about. That's what they're hiring for. They're not hiring somebody that knows how to work in some random other engine.
For real. I mean, like, you especially C++ it seems a lot more complex. Like, I learned it just a little bit through Unreal. Like, I started with Unreal and then I moved to Unity because I'm not really looking for like a specific job. I just wanted to make some games, and Unity seems much more user friendly for that. Like, really straightforward.
Oh, and I think it's easier for you to find a job working in Unity too. It's just if there are specific AAA studios, like Unity probably isn't going to help with those ones.
Right. You want to go work on Elder Scrolls 6? There's no way there's no way with Unity you're going to be. Maybe make the tools. Maybe as like dev tools, right? Like,
I don't even know what engine they use.
They use theirs. I think they use Bethesda's specific engine there, like Crytek.
Okay, yeah. So in that case, understanding Unreal and the C++ side would be helpful, but also understanding Unity could also be helpful there if they're not using Unreal, depending on what it is. Not as helpful though, because I'm sure it's some C++ engine underneath.
Like that's the standard.
Yeah.
For AAA studios. So I had a question in my head, and as we were talking, it went away. Let me just think. Well, this is my moment here. It happens
to me all the time.
Why don't you use Unreal? I use both. This guy, Fan Thomas, says. Well, that's what he was saying, is you can use whatever you want. It's kind of good to pick one starting out, though, because they have different syntax. They can teach the same thing. So game development is really game development, but the way you implement everything is going to be different.
Yeah, and the reason I don't use Unreal, is just that I don't have a use for it. Like, there's no projects that I need to work on that need Unreal or that are in Unreal, and there haven't been in a very long time. So I've just kind of pushed it off to the side. And if I ever need to, like, I ever come across some amazing project that I want to work on in Unreal, I'll jump back over there and pick it up again. But it just hasn't happened, and there hasn't been a case where I've needed to. So that's the only reason I don't really jump into it. Just lack of a need.
Right, exactly. I saw that's what my question was about your MMO. You're working on an MMO currently, like kind of a big project, right? Or no?
Not anymore. I was, but I've taken some time off of that to do my own stuff. I just haven't had enough time. It was a project that a really good friend of mine started a long time ago. I remember when he came over to my house and picked me up, and he started pitching me on this game idea that he wanted to build. And it was a really fun project, fun to work on and stuff. But he died in about a year ago.
Oh no!
And then my he was kind of like my tight link to that thing. And so since then, I've been really focused on, but I was still focused on that for a while, but lately I've been more focused on just the teaching side, and really trying to grow my YouTube channel and stuff. Plus, we've also brought in more kids to the house, so it's a little bit busier. So I've started to kind of just kind of cut out all of that and pretty much stopped completely working on anybody else's projects now. Only working on my own stuff, and then teaching, and just stopped working on other people's projects completely, which is different for me. I'm so used to, like, I've spent my whole life and career like working on other people's games and other people's projects. So it feels a little bit weird to me, but I don't mind it.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's you don't have any accountability to anyone but yourself at that point, so you're kind of just like, it's great, honestly. It's kind of freeing in a way. It seems like to me. I mean, I was in the Army before, so like this is kind of like the exact opposite. I get to do whatever I want now, so like I'm hesitant to even jump on another team because I know I'll get in some kind of clash where I'm going to be like doing what I want to do, and they're going to need me to do something else, and I just don't have the discipline anymore. I've lost it at this point. Oh man,
I'm sure you get it back, but yeah, YouTube will do that to you too. Just the ability to hop on and go live and record whenever you get an idea for a video. You just hop, like yesterday, randomly taking a shower, had an idea for a navigation video. I was like, I need to get out and go record that. Hop out and go record it. And I'm like, all right, I've done work today.
I think that's the beauty of YouTube. Do you recommend everyone? I mean, yeah, it's YouTube is pretty saturated, but I don't think it's oversaturated with the amount of people that are watching it. Do you think that there's a space for all these game developers to create their own?
Oh yeah, I think it's definitely worth doing. Even if you don't decide to keep going with it forever, like worst case, you'll get used to the process of showing some stuff and then teaching things. And when you start to teach things like this, when you start to record videos where you're showing things, it makes you, at least for me and for a lot of people I know, it makes you understand the thing a lot better, and kind of you'll feel this like push to understand why a thing is happening that you may have just kind of overlooked, because you're now like, somebody's going to ask me, why did that happen? And like, you're normally like, I don't care, I don't want to find out. Like, you get to the point where like you start to dig into the details a lot more of how and why things are working, so that you can explain them and answer the questions as they come along. So I find that as I teach things, I always end up with a much better understanding of the thing by the time I'm done teaching it than before I finish teaching it. And I think a lot of people think that to teach stuff, you need to already be an expert in it and know it really well. That's not necessarily the case. You really just have to be able to get the information, absorb it, and then kind of regurgitate it in a way that people can understand. It's more important. And you don't necessarily need to know it all. Most people teaching stuff don't know all the stuff they're teaching before they teach it. They go learn about it, research it, maybe even an hour before sometimes. And then they get on there like, okay, I understand this enough that I can share it, and now I'll get on there and share it. But most of the time, they're going to know it a little bit better than that. But there are plenty of times when, you just come across something like, hey, just learned something really cool. You need to share this, going to record a video on it, and now everybody else knows it too.
Right, I completely agree, and I feel the same way. I started my YouTube channel when I feel like I knew almost nothing. I started my own like devlog for a game, and then I started doing tutorials, and I feel like the tutorials are actually what have me understanding as much as I do so quickly. I feel like if I didn't do these tutorials, I wouldn't know half of what I did. So I recommend starting a YouTube channel for really anyone doing anything. If you want to start about anything, if you have any interest, start a YouTube channel about it, and you will understand it 100 times more. I feel, as long as you put in the work, it won't just magically happen. One question from a viewer on YouTube. He says, "What do you think the limit is of a solo game dev?" So like, how much can a person accomplish by spending 10 years on a game, right? Like when is it time to give up? I guess is the question, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, how much can one person accomplish without spending a decade on a giant project? To be honest, with indie game dev or solo stuff, I feel like it's kind of up in the air. I think if you hit it right and you have the fun idea and the good implementation, you can have a great success. But how the hell to come up with the fun idea is the hard part. Like, great implementation, you can kind of explain that, right? You make sure that everything works perfect, it's very polished, and that, a 4-year-old can get in and play the game with no problem. You're going to be, sitting good. But coming up with the fun game that people actually want to play is by far the hardest part, and that people want to play, and I mean, if it's an indie company, also pay for. It's way outside of my skill
Right,
set.
exactly.
Like,
I think going into being like a solo indie game dev, you should expect it to be a hobby, and if it's more than that, then it ends up being like a gift at that point. If you're going in expecting to get rich, I think it's really hard to. It's like making a indie film that you hope will be like, among the other movies like with Brad Pitt and stuff like that. It's kind of hard to compete with that consideration.
kind of. Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I mean, you definitely can build out like a good game and be successful and good at it. It's just a matter of like the hard part is outside of my skill set for sure. Like the hard part isn't usually there are two hard parts with the three really main things with game development, right? You got the marketing of the game to get it out there, which I'd say is hard, right? You've got the designing the game, which is like to make it actually fun. Like anybody can design a game, but designing something that is fun that people want to play, I think is hard. And then you got the programming, which is I think also hard, but it's the hard part that I really know and understand really well, and that I think that almost anybody can do. The other two parts, I don't know. Like I feel like I can barely do those. I'm sure that if you ask a designer or a marketer, they're like, yeah, anybody can learn this stuff. But like I still struggle with doing it well enough that it's entertaining, that it works, right? Like
right.
programming side, yeah, I got that.
Right, and someone's saying how do you identify good game design? I think that's kind of the same thing as like it's outside of the scope. Like if it's fun, right? Like if you could find
we'll find that people want to play it too, right? Like if you give people a game and they ask for more and they want to play it more, then it might be fun, right? But if you give people a game and they check it out and then they go, oh, that was neat, that was really cool, that was fun, and they hand it back to you, it's not fun.
Right, exactly. And you're trying not just have it be fun for you, you want it to be fun for other people. Otherwise,
it needs to be like, yeah. For me, it's I identify it as like the person, like you're asking them to hand it back and they say no, they want to keep playing. That means it's fun. This has only happened to me once, like on my own stuff, which was with a baseball game for VR that I made. I made a little VR baseball thing that was going to be a video tutorial, and I let my wife play it to test it. I was like, I need you to test this and see if it works. And then she kept playing it, and I was like, oh. She was like, I want to keep playing. Why'd you stop it? And I was like, that's weird. She's like, my wife hates video games. She never plays video games.
Right.
So it's really strange, right?
That's cool. And VR is so cool. I actually just bought myself an Oculus Quest. I bought it 2 weeks ago, and it's like taking so long to get here. But I wanted to start developing in VR as well. The Quest.
Oh, nice.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, I've got my Quest controller right here.
Can you use your hands too? Or do you need the controllers? Can you use your hands instead of the controllers, or you need to use the controllers?
I don't think you can. I think it's only the controllers, but I haven't actually tried. Dang. I didn't put my hands up without the controllers ever, so I'm not sure.
Because what I mean, the controllers are fine, but what I was thinking is I wanted to make like a dodgeball game. It's kind of the same thing as the baseball game in a way, because I feel like that kind of stuff in VR is the future. It kind of reminds me of the Matrix in a way. Like we're stepping into another world.
Yeah, the Quest is really cool too. This one just came a little while ago. I was really impressed with how much better it is than the previous headsets. It kind of blows away all the past VR headsets that I've had. So I was really, really impressed with it.
Is that the Quest 2? That's the new one?
Yeah, the Quest 2.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, so that's it looks so amazing. I've never had a VR set. The closest I got was in a mall. I played at like the Microsoft store on their HTC Vive. But that was like when it was new. It was like mind-blowing.
Yeah, the Vive is awesome.
That's one of the
that would be cool though. Once you get into developing with it too, you should have a lot of fun because it's actually really easy to build VR games. Like your controllers will essentially show up as game objects that move around with a script on them. You can see the state of the buttons and get trigger fire events when they push the buttons and stuff and walk around. Like, there's really like no code to set up a simple VR environment and like walk around and stuff. It's all kind of already there and pre-built. So it's easy to build in like a game. One of the things that I found myself doing, you might do too, is grabbing a bunch of art assets off the asset store and then teleporting around in them constantly. Like that looks cool. I wonder what it looks like in VR. So I'd go grab like the city and then go teleport around in the city. Like, all right, let's go to outer space. Let's like, no, I'm gonna go to a spaceship.
All right, so I have one question actually about assets and everything. So that's probably the hardest thing is finding assets that go together. How do you? And I know this probably falls back on the design, and you're gonna answer maybe you don't, but I feel like without literally spending an entire couple days just like digging through assets, I will never be able to find. I feel like I'd be better off just making my own assets, which is just garbage. I'm not that good, but how do you find
So
yeah.
you're just talking about finding like matching ones, right?
Yeah,
So you
exactly.
want to get like characters and an environment and then more buildings and things that all kind of match and go along with it. And it is something that people struggle with a lot, and they tend to make really ugly games because they have a hard time getting things that look the same or similar. So there are two different things that I like to do. Well, there are, I guess, three. One is, like you said, using a game designer, because I found that if I ask a game designer to do it, they don't complain about it as much as I do. They seem to enjoy it, and they do a much better job of finding things that are very similar and look well together and kind of mixing and matching those up. The other thing that I like to do, though, is just find a lot of stuff from a single artist. So I'll find like an artist that I really like, find their stuff, and then get as much of it as possible if it matches. But the third thing that I like to do there is also reach out to those artists. So if I find somebody who's got a lot of stuff that I like, and there are things that I need for the game that are not quite what they have, usually what I'll do is just reach out to them, ask them if they'd be interested in making it, how much they would charge for it. And a lot of the time, if you want to do it with these people that are building asset store stuff, you can. A lot of them are happy to do it for you for a fee. So maybe like 10 times what the asset would normally cost. If it's a $50 asset, maybe they'll want like $500, as long as they can release that asset on the asset store afterward.
Right.
And sometimes they'll do it like a month after or something, or right away. Most of the time I don't care. Like, what do I care if somebody else is using the asset?
Exactly.
It's not like I'm using it in my marketing materials as my main thing or something. So
it's not your main character of like a million player massively multiplayer online game. I guess it's not that big.
And then for those, if it is like a main character or something, then it just obviously go the route of them not publishing it there, or finding another artist somewhere who can do it. But I found that a lot of the asset store artists, they're relatively open to making custom stuff that they can sell on the store, because it's kind of like a 2-for-1 for them, right? They get to create art that they have long-term revenue on, and they get paid to make it. Right. So they don't need to get paid like an insane amount, and it's already matching with a style that they know kind of what it should look like and how it should work. So I think it's an easy one for a lot of asset store artists to do, to just make custom stuff for you that'll also go on the store just for an increased price of whatever it is. Just I'd reach out to them, say, hey, I really like this. I want to use these. I need this character. Like one of the ones I remember was we needed an archer. These low poly guys. We just needed like a low poly archer version. Can you make an archer one? Like, sure. Now it's just one of the things on the asset store too.
Well, that's cool. That's now other people can enjoy it as well. That's also what's good, dude. You pay it forward in a way, so that's cool. So another one in YouTube says, when do you feel would be the right time to start your dream game? I guess starting from a beginner, I guess, is where he's like, do you think you should start it like knowing nothing?
I would say when you think you can realistically complete it. Right, like when you look at it and you can say like, I have a plan for this. I can understand how I would build this, what it's going to look like, and it's not like just a nonsense idea like it'll take me a year because it took somebody else a year. Like, you've actually thought through it, have an idea of the actual scope, and all of the or most of the steps involved. I would say wait until you really, really think that you could finish it in a timeline that you could give yourself, and until then, work on building up skills and building up smaller things that you're interested in. I mean, if your dream game is the kind of thing that you can build in 6 months, then whatever, don't put it off. But a lot of the time when I hear people talk about dream game, it's like this, they want to build, I don't know, some giant thing, right? Usually some giant narrative-based thing that requires not just a bunch of code for systems, but a ridiculous amount of game design, story writing, placement of things and stuff, right? Like all of those games where they have 100-man teams to build out these giant worlds. They have that because that's like how many people it takes to put together that much content. So the other thing you can do is just build out a scoped down version of that dream game, or a vertical slice of it, right? Like figure out like what's the funnest part of this game? What is the thing that I actually really like about it? And just building that instead, or building that to start. If I feel like a lot of the time what you'll find is you'll build that and then you'll kind of pivot and switch to something else anyway, because you'll find that things are never exactly how you plan them out in your head when you come to game designing. It's always going to end up being something different that's fun, or something of playing it a little bit differently that makes it entertaining, and things that you think are fun often end up being terrible or tedious or boring.
Right, exactly.
So
grinding.
I had to work on just getting that slice out there and getting that done first instead of trying to build the whole thing. But except for just switching to the whole project, just make sure that it feels like something that you can really complete. Now, somebody was just asking what a vertical slice is in chat too, so just want to clarify that for everybody, because I used a stupid term and didn't clarify it. But it's essentially like a playable chunk of the game. So imagine you've got like what name a big game?
Right, like Oblivion, I guess. Elder Scrolls Oblivion.
Yeah, like Oblivion, and you've got one little area. You don't have all of the combat. You don't have all of the spell systems. You don't have all of the upgrades.
Like
you've got
or two.
Yeah, you've got a single town. You've got a quest or two in that town. You can run around. You can fight a couple. You got like 2 different monsters that you can fight, and you just have like the small little set of it. And it's usually not built out to be like super scalable. So like you're building up the slice kind of as if it's the only part of the game. Sometimes you build it out and like really plan it out. But if you're starting out this first time, build it out like imagine that like you're just thinking of this as your game, right? Like this little slice is your game. And then you know that later on you're going to change it up and do something later. But first you're just building this little piece out. It's really just building out that little very small chunk that has all of the different pieces put together. So it may not have, when it said like it doesn't have upgrades, it might not have your whole upgrade chain, but maybe it's got like 2 upgrades that you can get, right? So you can go in, you can kill things, get a little experience, and then you can pick like between 2 upgrades. Got a little bit of each of the systems in there to figure out what's going to be fun and if it's going to work, and then how you want to tie things together. And that's probably what I would recommend above trying to build the entire game at first, assuming that it's a big giant game, or just scope down your dream game to something that is smaller. Right?
Well, yeah,
that's hard. Right? Like everybody's dream game is like this giant world that they live in.
That's why it's a dream, and it's. I mean, even like the 100-man teams take 6 or 7 years to make a really big game, like polished game. So if you're thinking it's going to take you 10 years, it might. I mean, I don't know, but at that point you might lose all interest in that. Like, I think what you said earlier in the beginning is like ideas. There's a million ideas. Like, not to diminish anyone's dreams, but at the same time, like that's the perfect way to go about it, is to like take kind of the chunk of the game, make like a very polished prototype, or even take like one area and build one area as the full game, and then the next year or whatever, however long it takes, then you make the second area as a separate game, or you can mix them together. Like just do one at a time as individual games, and by the end of it, you might have a cool game. Who knows, with millions of mechanics in it too. Hopefully they mix.
Oh yeah, and you slowly start building up. And you think about like any of the old games too that are out there, any of the big games that are out there. Look at like GTA. The first GTA was a top-down little 2D thing where you ran around as a sprite, right? Like, and then it slowly got better and better. Obviously, technology improved, but so did like the team size and the skill set of the people building it, and the scope of the game, right? You start to build it up and get bigger and bigger as you go. I mean, GTA, I think, is kind of an extreme example because they're giant shift. But all the games like that, all of the big game developers that you could look at online, like the super famous ones out there, they've all started with small stuff. And then they built up and built up and built up, and then they release something that's like their huge hit that is now the thing they're known for, right? It's not the first thing that they built. Usually, it's
right. A lot of them started as like text-based or 2D sprite games, like all these big titles that are still going on. They're all like they started somewhere. They don't. It's not like you're gonna go out. I mean, with technology getting better, there's a big chance for you to make something that's like the quality of GTA on your own. I would say it's not going to be a super polished. You're going to have to spend a lot of money on assets, right? Like hundreds of thousands of dollars on good assets, custom assets. But I mean, I guess if you have it's all budget, right? At this point, it's kind of budget. And if you have like a good budget, if you're really rich prince, you could probably make your own GTA. I feel like some kind of Saudi prince.
Yeah, you'd have to hire a bunch of people to manage all those assets and all the other stuff.
Right, exactly. And okay.
If you're that rich, just start your own studio.
Yeah, for real. I mean, I think the problem with those studios, right, is like they throw so much money at every single game. They're like doing the same kind of the same thing that movies do. Is like they're hoping for just. I mean, they know by chance they're gonna have one good hit, so they just pump like unlimited money into each of these games, and then
Yeah.
that's. So I mean that's kind of what you're competing with at that point. With your dream game, though, I mean, I feel like exactly to the vertical slice method is probably your best bet to feel accomplished. And yeah,
And it doesn't have to be a huge game to be a big hit either. Like a lot of the popular games that come out aren't super complicated and full of content and full of stuff. They just come up with neat, interesting mechanics, and people like them.
right. Flappy Bird made $50,000 a day or something. So I mean,
Yeah,
that's
I
a
was
2 hour game.
definitely an oddity, but yeah, there's lots of them. There's just they don't have to be super complex to be super popular. They do need to be relatively polished, though.
Right.
They need to be
And
polished
fun.
and fun and interesting.
Yeah.
But complicated and huge, I would say no.
Yeah. Well, do you have anything you'd like to promote? You have your game.courses, right?
Oh yeah, you can check that out, or just go over to the YouTube channel, just my name, just Jason Weimann, and see my stuff there. About it. I don't really have much to promote.
No, that's awesome. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on. I think we're gonna call it now. It was awesome to have you on. Thank you so much for being on the second episode of my podcast. I hope I hope this podcast was valuable to anyone and anyone who sees this in the future. Cool. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Jason, for coming on. Have a
Yeah,
good
no
day.
problem. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe,
Oh, yeah.
and the alert and all that stuff too.
Yeah, like,
Make
subscribe.
sure you hit all those and share the stream.
Thanks for promoting my